Yo, what it do, everybody? Your favorite anti-hero is back with another video. For those who don't know me, I am the Pepperoni, and here I don't typically like to throw shade, but I do enjoy sprinkling pepper. Because I care. In today's video, we're going to be doing the book roast for the novel The Lumberjack by the author Eric Martin Willen. Warning. This video will have lots of spoilers for this book. Lots of spoilers for this book. First of all, let's just go ahead and talk about the cover. I do really like the cover. Straight up, I do like the cover. I actually made a post about the cover, kind of promoting it on Twitter. It's a great looking cover, but kind of as I referenced in the book review, all the elements of this book in terms of promotion, like the element that says be ready to fear him, and it says a novel of suspense, and it's on the back described as a thriller slash suspense, and it says here, looking for peace, she found a nightmare. Not to mention the creepy design of the cover. It all paints this image that it's going to be something really serious, and the book is just not serious. There are some serious elements in the book, but overall, this book is just smack full of comedy. It's got so many jokes, and yes, some of them are just like one-liner little zingers. Some of them actually work, some of them don't. But there are elements in this book, like there are jokes that are set up for like a whole page or longer. Like they're genuine, thought out jokes. And it's like none of this advertisement on the front or back, nothing says that this is supposed to be a comedy. When a reader gets this book, they don't expect to laugh most of the time. Every time something serious happens, there's comic relief. And it really, I don't know, it just pulls you kind of out of the mood. With that all being said, let's talk about this title, The Lumberjack. I think it's a bad title. I think the title of this book should have been Coffee and the Adventures of Those Who Drink It. Because seriously, everybody is drinking coffee in this fucking book. It's ridiculous. That's an unintentional joke. I've found myself actively just looking and waiting for the next person to pull out some coffee, and I was just fucking laughing the whole time. Page 32. Christina smiled at the sales pitch and hid her thoughts while finishing her hot black coffee. Page 46. She walked alone through the house while Frank went to the kitchen and put on some coffee. After talking for a while and drinking the cup of coffee, on page 49, Frank gestured toward the coffee brewer, and Christina nodded. He turned it on again, and while the wonderful aroma of fresh brewed coffee filled the room, he continued informing her about the house do's and don'ts. Then, after talking for a little bit, they drink the cup of coffee. A guy named Robert shows up, and Christina and Robert are kind of like instantly attracted to each other, and they become all shy and tongue-tied. And on page 51, that character Frank comes to the rescue. It says on 51, Frank came to the rescue and laid his arm over Robert's shoulder. How about some coffee, bud? Then on page 52, Christina, the main character, can't talk apparently. And so Frank comes to the rescue again, and it says in dialogue, Christina, how do you want your coffee? She's like, black will be fine. Then Robert responds by saying, "Great, my kind of gal. The only way to drink this magical brew." On page 58, there's a physical conflict that is coming to an end between an average sized person and a giant. And the giant, well, it says, with that, on page 58, it says, "With that said, the Yeti, the giant guy, spat a stream of black juice in Joseph's face, giving him a broken tooth smile before he tossed Joseph over his shoulder like a rag, sipping on his coffee without spilling a drop." So he's manhandling this guy, throwing him over his shoulder while he's sipping his coffee. After the fight, he of course then gets in his car, and he's still got his coffee, and he sets it right beside his spit cup. You can see that setup coming. On page 59, he then tries, as he's driving, to take a sip of what is described in his thoughts as, quote, "nothing like a mix of fresh coffee and shoe." Of course, he grabs the wrong cup and drinks his dip spit. Ha, it's a funny joke, but whatever. Page 68. She went downstairs into the kitchen and put on some coffee. Page 76. He placed his leather ropers on the morning paper on his desk, enjoying his third cup of strong black coffee this morning. As the scene unfolds, an old lady walks in, and on page 79 it says, "Without a word, she walked out, and as she passed his desk, she took his coffee cup." She basically, I guess, throws it away. And he's like, "Hey, I wasn't done. I hadn't finished that, blah, blah, blah." After the conversation with her, he's mad. He goes back to his desk, and he just reflexes and reaches for his coffee, and turns out it's gone. This is on page 80. He got back on his feet and headed towards the coffee maker downstairs. For some time in the near future, he was going to get his own coffee maker in his own office. Then on page 81, we get this nice little bit. He walked into the kitchen and looked sadly at the empty carafe. To his dismay, he had to make more coffee, and no one liked his coffee. Hell, he didn't even like it much. Cutting way back on the amount of grounds he usually used, he waited patiently. When it finished, he poured a rich tasting cup. Not bad this time. That's narration, by the way. That's not the character saying that with an exclamation point. It continues. He was just about to take a second sip when the alarm went off. A couple lines later, Carlos put down the coffee cup on the kitchen counter. Blah, blah, blah. Page 85, two characters encounter one another, and one of them says, "I'll take care of it. It's just stone, not like it'll stain." "Coffee?" question mark. So, of course, then they go and drink coffee. There was a scene earlier on in the book that the main character Christina was a part of, and afterwards, on page 124, it reads, "Someone had brought the rescue workers some sandwiches and coffee, but she had missed out on that." Page 130, Claire joked, and then she continued, handing Frank a plastic bag. Dialogue: "I made you a couple of ham and cheese sandwiches and some fresh coffee." In chapter 12, there's basically a scene where this Blasian couple is about to have sex, and then they're interrupted by some people bringing in some animals that are all ripped apart. It's bloody, it's chaotic, and it's like, holy shit, we gotta, patch these animals up before they die. And then after all the commotion, on page 145, you have this piece of dialogue. "I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to put on some freshly grounded coffee. Might toss in some stronger stuff too." Page 152. She brewed some coffee and made herself a cheese sandwich. Too bad on the very next page it says she dropped her coffee cup. Page 189. Frank was in the kitchen, putting on some fresh coffee. Page 190. Frank had tears in his eyes, but he shook off his somber mood. Dialogue. So, coffee? Later down the page, Frank handed Peter a cup of coffee. He accepted, but never drank from it. Page 196. When she finished, she returned to the kitchen and made some tuna sandwiches, sour cream dip with a handful of salted pickles, and a pot of fresh coffee made from grounded beans. Page 213. Carlos could smell fresh coffee being brewed. Page 217. Both looked at Penelope while she was setting a table with a pot of coffee. Page 223. Penelope walked to the kitchen and got some more coffee for everyone. On page 227, somebody comes in and wakes up the main character, and when he does, he says, "Congratulations, Mr. Billing sends you his regards. Is the coffee on?" Then on page 228, he says, "There is no coffee. Did you know that?" She's like, "Of course. You just woke me up. I haven't been awake long enough to make it." And he's like, "Don't you worry about a thing, darling. In a few minutes, there'll be some fresh coffee." Then there's basically a big playful moment where she's thrown outside, and by the time she gets back inside, at the bottom of page 228, it says, "When Christina found them in the house drinking coffee," blah, 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 blah. Then on page 229, Peter had his head stuck in a newspaper, sitting on one of the bar stools by the kitchen island, drinking coffee. You know, as much coffee as these people drink, how come none of them get the shits? I mean, it's basically a comedy book anyway, so should have put that in there. Page 246. She grabbed a cup of coffee from a vending machine once she was inside the small terminal. Page 261. Kevin smiled towards the strangers behind the girls. Then dialogue. "Hi there, Robert and Boris. Come on in. Coffee?" Page 289. Claire handed out towels and made some coffee and hot chocolate. Then on page 291, Claire handed both a cup each of steaming hot coffee. Page 301, he smiled when he noticed a cup of fresh brewed coffee and a mint sitting on the table next to him. Page 306, two enamel pots on a tipper already had a line of people helping themselves to coffee. In chapter 33, they have defeated the villain, and everybody's celebrating, everybody's coming back together, and of course, here comes Malik. On page 383, it says, Malik stepped up, drinking coffee from a huge mug. Of course he is. I wouldn't expect anything less. Damn, that took 40 minutes to track down all those instances of the word coffee. This is going to be a long video. Now, with so much mention of coffee, which is typically a drink that is enjoyed when someone wakes up, you might assume there's a lot of waking up in this story. There's actually a trope in stories that writers are supposed to stay away from, which is starting the book off with the main character waking up. You know, you start your day off by waking up. Why not start your book by having your character wake up. Well, thankfully, the author, Eric Martin Willen, does not do that. This book does not start with a waking up scene, and when the main character is first introduced, she's not waking up. She's simply arriving to town on an airplane. However, the opening of chapter 5. Christina slept like a baby in the huge super king size bed, completely bare, and hogged it all to herself. She woke up slowly and sighed. Her sleeping like a baby is not really significant because on page 27, when she's on a couch, it says Christina slept like a baby through the night. The beginning of chapter 7. Dialogue. Wakey, wakey, Miss Cowgirl. You all right? Slap, slap. Christina's eyes opened, so she's waking up. The opening line of chapter 14. Christina woke up with a hellish headache. The opening of chapter 15. Someone else says, she's waking up. Better get the doctor, one nurse said to another as they prepared the hospital bed. Christina woke up slowly, her vision a blur. The opening of chapter 20. Christina woke up that morning to a buzzing sound. The opening of chapter 23. Christina shouted in agony. Dialogue. The bells, the bells, the bells, my head, the fucking bells, you bastards. She lay in her bed, staring at the noisy owl and flipped the peeping Tom off. Dialogue. Wakey, wakey, you lazy brats. Get up, breakfast is served. The sun is shining and the cows need milking. So she's waking up again. Wonderful. Now, fortunately, in this story, in all these waking up scenes, there isn't a moment where the author does the trope of the character looking in the mirror and analyzing their appearance as a way to inadvertently tell we, the readers, what the main character looks like. However, there's not really much description of the main character. We're told that she has dark hair. I mean, that's something, I guess. But not much else. And the same goes for the antagonist, the character known as the Beast, or Nero, or Ted, or whatever fucking name you want to go with. Basically, everybody who is described in this book in terms of appearances basically just touches on all the SJW labels. The black guy, the Mexican guy, the Indian guy who wears a turban on his head, the Muslim guy, the fat woman, the gay guy, the lesbian women, the Native American guy, the Blasian couple, the guy who's from Sri Lanka, and the black woman who is from South America, who is described as, well, a dark Amazonian. Well, it does at least say that she's tall and skinny like a model. I mean, that counts for something. But then again, here on page 57, you get some beautiful descriptions about this really important character named Little Noise. It says he has a huge, scarred face with tiny dark eyes that displayed absolutely no intelligence whatsoever, framed by thick, messy, long, dark, grayish hair, and a long beard, all in a desperate need of a good trimming. So, that's awesome. At least we get a lot of details about that guy. Too bad he dies, like, early on. In fact, it's his body who it's his body that's found in the opening pages of the prologue. So, do we really need to know all that? Details are cool and all, but if I want some extensive details, maybe it'd be better to get them about the main character. That's a novel idea. Now, as I mentioned, there is a black woman in this story who is from South America, but I don't know what her name is. I just call her Dan. That's really the only consistent thing. You see, her name, the spelling of her name changes continuously throughout the story. I suspect that her name is Daniela, and it's spelled like that, ending in L-A, because in the story, that spelling comes up 36 times. However, this spelling, ending in L-E, that comes up 4 times. Then there's this spelling that ends in L-L-A, that comes up once. And then there's even this spelling that ends in L-L-E, that also appears once. So this author had a really hard time with that name. And then, of course, the character named Adriana, her name is misspelled 2 or 3 times. I didn't count. At least the main character's name was never misspelled. That's always nice. And of course, by main character, I mean the character named Christina Dawn, who, I don't know why she's the main character, but she apparently is. She's basically just a stand-in. She's just there to be sexual. That's all I can figure out. This character appears in this book naked so many times, like right off the bat. And the visual lens of this author, the author views this story from the perspective of watching a movie. Not from writing a story, but everything is film and movie and TVs. And so it forces you as the reader to visualize that as well. And it makes it really weird because it's like, okay, let's assume this is turned into a film adaptation. Now we have to ask this woman to be naked in all these scenes. And she wakes up naked, just spread out with her legs wide open, like she's ready for the next porn star to come in. And then she wraps herself in a sheet in one scene, and she goes out on her deck to drink her coffee, and then a random fucking helicopter just descends out of nowhere, like, yo, what the fuck is up? And then the wind blows her sheet off, and she's totally naked again. And then she decides, you know what I'll do? I'll walk all slow and seductive. She walks over and picks up her sheet and walks over to the door. And before walking inside, she kind of throws out her hip and then looks back at the guys and smacks her ass like, yeah, boys, I bet you wish you could have this. And then walks inside thinking, showed them. Yeah, you showed them that you're a slut, that you just don't care about people seeing you naked. Showed them everything, okay? You really showed them. And then she goes running, and then she's like, yo, I'm hot, I'm gonna jump in this creek. I should do it naked. So she does, and then that gets out of hand, and she almost dies, and then she finally gets out of the creek way downstream and has to run out into traffic, flagging down cars naked. Then you have the scene towards the end where it literally says in the book that she looks like Lara Croft, the Tomb Raider. the fictional character. So she's dressed up in like tank top, booty shorts, combat boots. Like she looks like Laura Croft apparently, spitting image apparently. So she's all sexual looking, and then she goes on like what I'm assuming is a 12-hour hike through the snowy woods and mountains. That seems a little unreasonable. But I imagine she's about as excited as Courtney Cox and Jennifer Aniston when they were acting on Friends. Then there's like the weird conversations that she has with her friend Tammy. It's like, and then like her internal dialogue, like she is so perverted, like all she thinks about is sex. Every time she's around this dude named Robert that she just met, like she just keeps thinking about having sex with him and trying to figure out how to hook up with him, and it's weird. That seems more like something a guy would think than a woman. And then the two girls talk on the phone, and all they do is the whole conversation is like sex and blowjobs and dildos and using cucumbers when you don't have a dildo. And then that somehow morphs into lesbian sex. The friends like, you know, hinting at maybe sleeping with the main character. Just, it's weird. And then of course you have the sex scene where the two, I guess, rednecks are having sex, and it turns into like anal sex. There's a lot of sexual undertones in this book. Not to mention the main character always getting her ass slapped. Like, I don't know why that's a thing. Like, she just keeps getting her ass slapped, and it's written like it's a joke. Like, it's so funny that she just keeps getting her ass slapped. I don't know. It's not very politically correct, which is weird for this book. And by the way, sexually licking lips, that's not a thing. And it's kind of cringy when we read it. And there's a lot of lip licking in this book. There's also this weird, I don't know, man. I'll just read what's in the book. Page 23. She gathered herself and was just about to launch into a rage and let the brute have it, but all she could do was stutter like a little schoolgirl. Page 65 to 66. Beatrice herself, who normally would need 4 paramedics to carry her on a stretcher, and was tossed on her own bed, giggling like a drunken schoolgirl. Which, by the way, is a weird combination. I'm just saying. Then on page 144, he wasn't going to have any of that, so he flipped her over and slapped her butt. Dan, whatever her name is, giggled like a naughty schoolgirl. You see what I mean? Like, this schoolgirl thing just keeps coming up. Now, I mentioned that the author views this story from the eye of film. It's kind of ridiculous, to be honest. Throughout this whole story, pretty much every time something happens, the author is saying, you know, the town looked small and western, kind of like in those old western films. Or the road was deserted, like an old western film. Or people like to watch those wilderness shows a lot, but they don't know what it's really like. Or there was excavators and dump trucks everywhere. It looked like one of those logging TV shows. People like to watch those TV shows about like man versus wild and living out in the woods, but it's not really as fun and easy as they make it out to be on TV. Or his favorite show was the show Dexter. This goes on and on. Like, there's so many examples, I don't want to pick through it because this is already going to be a long video. But there's a lot of them. You don't have to continuously say in narration, it's like this TV show, and it's like that TV show, and it's like this movie, and it's kind of like this genre of movies. On and on and on, man. And this then segues into this this really forced element in this book where every scene's got scene music. This isn't a movie. It's a book, man. It's so forced. Like, if you are the sound director guy in a movie, then hey, man, that's your job. You make sure that when I see that scene, I'm going to hear that particular song that you picked out. Cool. But when I'm reading a book, like every scene, like, guy gets in the car, turns on the radio, and this song was playing by this artist. Or then they walked in the bar, and on the jukebox was this song played by this artist. That song went off, and then a new song came on. But who was it from? The character asks, and someone answers, oh, that song is by so and so, and its name is blank. You know, on and on and on. Like, this keeps happening, and like, the main character, like, you can kind of get away with, or not the main character, the antagonist, you can kind of get away with it because he's like psychotic and he's like in a delusional state, so he's just blaring this music. He's playing Beethoven all the time in different songs and shit. But like, no joke, man, like, it's kind of cringy. There are songs I didn't know half of these songs. So I'm reading it and I'm like, okay, that song is playing. I don't know what the fuck that sounds like. Anyway, moving on. I mean, did you expect me to just go to, just close the book, get on YouTube and look up the song and be like, oh, that's what that song sounds like. I'll just let it play in the background while I continue reading. Like, nah, man. People don't do that. At least, I don't. In addition, some of the songs are like really long, thorough, word for word titles of YouTube videos. So it's just like, you type in the word for word of this fucking whole sentence, and it's going to take you to a very specific video of a live performance, and it's just like, okay, whatever, man. I mean, that's not necessarily a writing sin, but it's not very professional. One thing that really stuck out as I was reading this book is a question. Who is this book for? Who is the target market for this book? I mean, as I said, it's supposed to be like a thriller slash suspense, yet it's full of jokes. So I don't know that, but in addition, we're in a very, politically controversial time in America. Well, in the Western world in general, but, it takes place in America, so in America. And it just really confuses me because there's so much in this book that seems like it's tiptoeing around political correctness. I mean, everybody is in this book. Every little subcategory has got their equal representation in this book. I mean, you want to talk about arcade books? This is a super arcade book. If you are a collector, get this book. There are so many tokens in here, you're going to be cashing in for sure. And of course, it's not directly said that this one particular character is a Trump supporter. It doesn't say the name Trump, but it's pretty clear this character is supposed to be a Trump supporter. She mentions like the wall and keeping people out. She is a walking stereotype of what a Trump supporter is supposed to be. I mean, she is every buzzword that is thrown at Trump supporters. This character is a racist, a sexist, a xenophobic, Islamophobic, whatever, man. She's all these bad things that are slapped on Trump supporters, right? So it seems like it's meant for people who would be registered Democratic voters, right? However, this author cannot stop writing the dick of police. I mean, this author is obsessed with worshiping the ground that police walk on. And in addition, this book is smack full of, well, offensive terms. I'm just going to phrase it that way. Non-politically correct phrasings. I mean, you just go down the list, it's all in here. Racial slurs, homophobic slurs, just bigoted phrases, Islamic or anti-Islam, whatever, all that stuff. There's anti-trans phrases in here. All these things that would trigger a Democratic voter, it's in here. In addition, there's one character, there's a guy who's very overweight, and he is repeatedly referred to as like a blob and a fat ass and just very derogatory phrases in description to his weight. So it's fat shaming, it's body shaming, right? In addition, the character is continuously, that overweight character, he's continuously crying. And in narration and in dialogue, he's called like a crybaby and a wimp, and he's just overall degraded and just demonized for being very emotional because he's a man. It's basically painting this picture that he's bad because he's a man and he's showing all this emotion. So that's like the toxic masculinity shit, right? You know, it's saying that it's shaming men for showing emotion. They gotta be tough. That's the only way a man can be, right? That's shit that Democratic voters are against. Yet it's all in the book, from characters and narration. I mean, if you're a pro-Trump supporter, you're obviously not gonna like it. You're gonna be offended, and you're gonna be just turned off by all the SJW PC shit. But then, if you're anti-Trump and you're into SJW PC shit, you're going to be triggered and hate a lot of this stuff. So, again, who is this target market? I'll get real with you for a second. This is my words of advice, my words of wisdom. If you ride the fence, you're just going to successfully piss off people on both sides of the fence. It's better to please only 20% of your readers 100% than it is to please 100% of your readers only 20%. Another thing, there's a character named Dakota who is a Native American. On page 322, they're basically about to try and pursue the bad guy. At the bottom of 322 it says, Dakota wore a headband representing his Lakota heritage, 2 feathers braided into his thick hair, ready to go into battle and counter-coup with his rifle. Of course, then it says that the new sheriff, Malik, it says Malik ignored Dakota's headband. Really, man? This author may as well have just put him in like war paint. When he goes out for patrols, does he leave his standard issue nightstick in his locker and instead carry a tomahawk? But hey, man, he's just showing respect for his heritage, right? That's the way his ancestors went into battle, right? It's totally okay. He's just honoring them. Okay, Okay, if you want to go that route, on page 167, in reference to the character Malik, who is the sheriff later in the book, it says in narration, his bluish black skin, which made him seem more African than African American, only made his dark stare even more intense. Okay, so if the Native American has to honor his ancestors by dressing up in their war attire, how come Malik doesn't just fucking strip down into like a little leotard, paint his face up white, grab him a spear, and go charging after Nero? I mean, hey, that's how his ancestors did it in Africa, and we gotta honor his ancestors. It's only right. I mean, damn, man. This then segues me into the topic of these two guards that worked for the main character, right? Christina. So there's these two guards, and turns out there's a big reveal, I guess, that they're gay. And it's one of those things where it's like, it seems like the author was trying to pander to SJWs by putting these two gay characters in here, right? These two tokens. But then the way he does it, it would offend the SJWs. And here's the thing, I'm not gay, and I found it offensive. And I'll tell you why. When these two characters are first introduced, right, they're introduced very stern. They're very serious. They don't smile. They probably stand around with their hands, crossed at their wrist, at their waist, with their fingers in their ears. They're speaking in their wrists. They're very professional, right? This is when the audience assumes that they're probably just normal heterosexual guys. Then, when it's revealed that they're not just into men, but they're actually into each other, no pun intended, their whole character flips. They instantly become real happy and playful, and they're joking around, and they're saying sexual jokes, and they keep throwing the main character over their shoulder and smacking her ass. It's so funny. And they throw her in the pond. There's a scene where they wake her up and they're like fucking frat boys. Like on page 227, they wake her up honking a horn. And she's like, "Stop honking the horn, you shithead. I'll do anything. Just make it stop." And then narration, a smiling Kevin leaned out the window, having stopped playing with his new toy, talking about the horn, and he says, "Then do something hot and sexy." Christina sighed, "And it hurt us." And then he shouts again, "Show us some skin, toots." So like they become like almost flamboyant, really sexualized gay guys. Like out of nowhere. And you might say, well, this is highlighting something in society. How the homosexuals feel that they must hide under a facade. They have to pretend to be normal. And it shows how when they were in the closet, so to speak, they were acting normal, right? But then when it was revealed that they were actually gay, then they could be themselves. And this is just them being who they really are. Okay, I mean, I guess there's an argument that could be made there. But that doesn't check out, man. Here's why. You have to figure out what it is you're trying to put in your book in terms of context. Are you writing a story that is supposed to be down to earth and highlighting social problems in society? and showing it exactly how it is? Or are you showing basically your imagined version, your fantasy of what you think society should be? And by portraying how it could be, or in your perspective, how it should be, you can highlight the potential positives and show the world, hey, we could change and we could better the world by doing and becoming like the fictional scenes and characters in my book, right? The book is so full of this quote equal representation that it appears that they're trying to do option B. The author is trying to portray the way things should be, not the way things actually are. Because the reason I say that is it doesn't say what state this is supposed to take place in, and the Skull Creek town is fictional. But if you look at the context of everything around here, it's supposed to be a deserted little western town, high up in the mountains. There's rednecks everywhere. There's gold mines. There's all these drillers and these lumberjacks, bikers. This is not a fucking liberal wonderland, okay? This is not a democratic stronghold like San Francisco. The main character left that world to come to this world. So when you're out in these what Democrats call flyover country, you're not going to find all of this diversity. This book in this setting should have been nothing but white people. And it should have been nothing but like heterosexual white people who probably all are Republicans. Because that's the location that this story takes place in. Like, look at the Blasian couple. Like, why would a guy come from Sri Lanka and then a woman come up from South America and then they decide, let's go to this little fucking town out in the middle of bumfuck nowhere. Yeah. And then there's like a Swedish tourist who's there. And then there's like the Indian guy who's actually from India who's wearing the turban. He's a Hindu. Specifically, it says he's Hindu. I mean, like, that's not in small town America. It's just not realistic. So this is a fantasy of what it's supposed to be. And then you have these gay characters who, when the cloak is removed, and they're like, haha, we're gay. Now all of a sudden their whole character changes. And I have a problem with that because what you're sexually attracted to doesn't define your personality. I have never once talked to a guy and, talking to him 10, 20 minutes, I'm like, oh, hold up, buddy. Are you into redheads? And the guy'd be like, yeah. How'd you know that? Bruh, I could just tell by the way you were talking and acting. I just knew that you were someone who was sexually attracted to redheaded women. That's not a thing. It doesn't matter if you're sexually attracted to redheaded women, or black-haired women, or brown-haired women, or blonde women, or if you're attracted to tall women, or small women, or heavy-set women, or very thin women, or people who are not women at all and are men. That's not going to change your personality. And so, this idea that just because these characters are gay, they have to completely change, it's a stereotype. And it's ridiculous. The most badass, most world famous warrior / military leader in human history, Alexander the Great, was bisexual, and historians believe he swung more towards men than women. So if these two guards they're gay, so be it. Why can't they be serious and tough and professional and also be gay? And this goes back to, who is this target market, man? Something I've noticed about not just this book, but all the books that I've reviewed and roasted so far, a common mistake in terms of just a grammatical error that I see authors make is they completely leave out function words. Words like is, or the, or a, or in. These words tend to be left out. And when the author is reading over their manuscript, they know what the sentence is supposed to say, and so they're actually just unintentionally, they're putting the words into the sentence in their head without it actually being on the page. And that happens, like I said, in this book. One kind of weird thing that happens as a grammatical issue in here is the author actually gets words swapped. I don't know why that happens. That's kind of weird. So like there'll be a sentence. Let me show you. Here's one early on page 70. The sentence reads, Frank had told her several stories how about people who had lived there for years had gotten lost, as well as tourists, blah, blah, blah. That probably got kind of confusing in there. It's because these words need to be reversed. If you can get it, there it is. The words how and about. And that's just one example. I didn't count them. I mean, I circled them. I'm not going to hunt them down. There's probably about 4 or 5 of those in this book. I don't know how that happened. It's kind of strange, but it's okay. It's not a problem. I can figure it out. But there is something that fucking drives me insane about this book. This fucking book, man, it is all over the place when it comes to numbers. It is so not consistent. I mean, just 1 second it's numerical, the next it's word. It's insane. Fucking pick one, man. This shit keeps me up at night. And there's just so many examples in this story. I mean, there's no way I could point them out, man. It'd take another hour and a half of me physically hunting them down, and another 30 minutes of video. But I will show you the worst one. On page 207, in word form, it says 100 and then the word percent. See that? 100%. Right? But back here on page 49, numerical, 100, and then even the symbol. And then it happens again on page 332. Fuck it, man. Sleep's overrated anyway. Let's talk about this antagonist, Nero. Reading through this book initially, I was like, alright, there's problems. It happens. But then I got to chapter 16. Bruh. This character drives me insane. First of all, page 172, 173, 174, 175, and then about half of 176 is all just info dumping. It's just telling me he's this, telling me he's that, telling me he likes this, telling me he doesn't like that. Some people think he's this, but that's because he's got all these other nicknames and blah 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 blah. Shit we could figure out. Don't assume that your readers are stupid and can't figure these things out. And if they can't figure it out, it's probably because you didn't write it very well. So in narration, it says, he had evolved far beyond what he had begun as. He was no longer one of the weak, inferior two-leggeds, as he referred to them. It had taken him a lifetime to achieve the transformation that made him the perfect, superior being, born a man, transformed into an animal, and yet he was neither. There is absolutely no reason for the reader of this story to think that, other than the narrator telling us that. Because if you just read the book, he's just a guy. Now on page 172 to 173, it says, he had just one belief, and then it says, he had been created to help Mother, which is Mother Earth, speed up the process for the end of humankind. So his goal is to see the complete eradication of humanity, to save the earth, right? This is then followed by saying going after politicians seemed ridiculous to him. Why? They're humans. The point is to get rid of humanity. They're all a cancer on the earth by this person's belief system. They all should die. There's none that are worthy of life. Then on page 174, it says in narration, normally he didn't mind people in law enforcement. Does he not know that they're part of humanity? It tries to justify this by saying, after all, there were billions of selfish idiots out there destroying the planet who needed his attention before any police. Okay, so he's setting his priorities, but the idea that he doesn't mind people in law enforcement? Why not? They're humans. They're supposed to be destroyed. This is then shown in a scene later where Nero basically saves a cop from like a biker gang, basically, and causes a big fire. Like he's going out of his way to save cops, or at least that particular cop. But then even that is contradicted because there's like the whole big shootout where he kills a bunch of cops. I thought you didn't mind people in law enforcement. It's just inconsistent. What the hell? I believe there's a problem in this book where it's actually something highlighted in a recent video put out by the novel editor Ellen Brock, where the writer has put themselves in the shoes of a character too much. They're in love with this character, and so they can't bring themselves to say negative things about the character because they unconsciously would feel like they're insulting themselves. And so this character, Nero, who is supposed to be the antagonist, he's supposed to be the villain, right? This character is constantly defended by the narrator. On page 175, it says, all two-leggeds were enemies. Make no mistake. So here it's declaring, again, that all of humanity must be destroyed, that none are worth saving, right? In this scene, he kidnaps two people who are kitten killers. And in this scene, the villain, the antagonist, is framed as if he is an anti hero breaking social taboos to unfold justice, right? And the way it's framed, that's exactly how the reader interprets the whole situation, that he's the good guy. Now, these two characters, they don't know who he is or how they got there. It's not shown or explained. Anyway, he kidnaps these guys who killed some kittens, and in that particular situation, they gave the main character Christina a hard time. And on page 178, this evil, antagonist who wants to eradicate all of humanity is basically grilling these two individuals and beating them with like a moral righteous stick, saying in dialogue, this is the beast, the one who wants to kill all of humanity. So you guys didn't think she might need saving? Question mark. Because they were saying, they're like they just hit her with a stick or whatever, and they were possibly going to rape her. And he's saying that they're bad for not trying to save her, that they're bad for doing what they were doing. Then compare that to what is on page 274. In this scene, the beast, Nero, comes across these two hippies in the woods. Nero twisted Rasta hippie's head sideways and looked at the guy's eyes. Yep, high as a kite. The next thing it says is, no killing required. But he sure needed a new shirt. Moments later, after having to listen to all kind of profound language, he had removed the long shirt with its strange flower print and a t-shirt with Bob Marley on it from the hippie. Why was there no killing required? Isn't he human? Why did he have to listen? That implies that he was very uncomfortable, that he was either unhappy in some way, shape, or form, sad or angry or embarrassed or something, some type of unsatisfactory feeling was being produced inside of Nero, listening to this guy talk, this human who is part of a group that he wants to eradicate, and no killing was required. Back here on page 173, it says, when speaking about Nero, what he did was as normal to him as breathing. He felt neither joy nor remorse when taking another life, be it human or animal. So if killing is just natural, then why does he not kill the hippies? Why does he think that no killing is required? Okay, your goal requires you to kill all of humanity. But if killing is just natural to you, then why would you describe it as a requirement? No killing required. Killing is just killing. It's just what you do naturally, right? It's like breathing. It's like looking up at a tree and thinking, should I breathe right now? Nah. No breathing required. I'll just hold my breath for a while. This scene on page 274 continues with him round kicking a girl in the face and knocking her out. Says she dropped like a log next to her boyfriend Todd. And it says, Nero looked at the two idiots, contemplating killing them, or killing both, but decided against it. Back in chapter 16, listen to these gymnastics that the author is going through.
He had no sexual interest in any woman, though he was what people would label as straight. It was just that fornication was only to be done for procuring a child. Animals didn't fornicate for pleasure, only to ensure the future existence of their species. He didn't see or feel any pleasure in fornication. In fact, he found the idea disgusting. After all, who would want to fornicate with a lesser species? He had no urge in that department, as the newly evolved species he was. However, there still was a small part of the human left in him, and like all humans, he was curious. Not so curious that he would rape a woman just so he could satisfy his curiosity. The very thought was repulsive. Rapists and others who committed heinous crimes should be removed from the surface of the earth. Prison was a waste of time. Killing them wasn't. That's the kind of shit that goes on for like 5 pages. But did you catch that at the end? This guy who wants to eradicate all of humanity, right? He says rapists and others who commit heinous crimes. What kind of heinous crimes? Murder? Rapists and others who commit heinous crimes should be removed from the surface of the earth. Prison was a waste of time. Killing them wasn't. So, Nero, are you saying that somebody who robs a bank doesn't deserve death? Instead, they should go and serve their time in prison and then eventually leave prison and try to merge back into society to be a beneficial member of the world. All humans, or two-leggeds, must die. You should save this girl. Police aren't that bad. Some criminals don't deserve death. They should just go to prison. These hippies, killing is not necessary. And then you go on this spiel about how he doesn't want to rape. Why does he think rape is so bad? I mean, planetary eradication? That's not bad. That's justified. Raping one girl? You deserve death. You understand I'm supposed to hate this character, right? I'm not supposed to be rooting for him. Then on page 176 it says, he had no difficulty killing a 10-year-old if that person committed a heinous crime against Mother Nature or animals. Okay, so is that your definition of what a heinous crime is? If someone commits a heinous crime, then they should be killed. Even this 10-year-old, apparently. So, I'm supposed to be against him for killing the kid, but at the same time, he's not that bad. It's not like he's a rapist. It says, committed a heinous crime against Mother Nature or animals. How is raping a human, a two-legged, a crime against Mother Nature or an animal? I thought you didn't care about humans. Then you have this injection right here on page 179. It's a miracle that the police nowadays have the patience not to shoot shitheads like these. He thought. Are we sure that Nero thought that? Are we sure that's not just the thoughts of the author? Then you have this thing where it says, Nero didn't torture. Well, he might play with his prey like cats do, but he wasn't a sadist like the two downstairs. A sadist is someone who derives pleasure, joy, just euphoria from the suffering of others, be it physical or mental. On page 173, it says, "There was nothing as thrilling as hunting a two-legged. Using psychological terror on the prey before the kill was euphoria." I believe it's supposed to be euphoric, but you get the point. He's deriving pleasure from the psychological terror of his prey. That's the same exact thing when a guy is beating the shit out of a woman and he feels dominance over them and he sees the terror in their eyes. That's all there. That's the same thing. He's deriving pleasure from their pain. However, that's then contradicted back here on page 173. It says, "When he had been a simple two-legged, he had never had any sort of sadistic streak in him, nor did he suffer from so-called rape syndrome, or want power and control over other living beings." Really? That's not a thing he does? It goes on in narration, weak-minded characters did that, like so many two-leggeds. So this guy enjoys hunting people, having that control over when a person dies, having that control over how they die. He hunted down two people, and he currently, in that scene, has them tied up in his basement under his control. He's then using psychological terror and mind games to torture them because he derives pleasure from it. On page 180, it says, "Before either victim realized what had happened, Nero had moved swiftly, and with surgical precision he sliced off the left ear of each, using an old, rusty, but very sharp knife." So now he's inflicting physical pain on these kidnapped victims. He then releases them to be eaten by wolves. So they're torn apart alive by wolves. That's how they assumingly die. But then here on page 182, the narration says, "However, it was expected. One thing all sadists, rapists, and sociopaths seemed to have in common was that they were all cowards." In reference to his victims. So the two victims of this guy, Nero, when he releases them, they run away for their lives into the woods. And the narrator, not Nero, the narrator is saying that they're all cowards. That these two individuals, these kitten killers, are cowards. And he's comparing them to sadists, rapists, and sociopaths. This is then drawn in direct contrast to the line of internal dialogue by Nero in the immediate previous line, which reads, "They didn't try to get inside the house and take care of me like they promised." He thought, a little disappointed. So here, in this situation, it is being revealed that he's disappointed that they didn't come up there and try to kill him, that they didn't try to stop him. This is trying to draw a distinction between them being cowards and him being brave, right? What this really means is that Nero is running off of adrenaline. He enjoys dangerous situations. He has a lack of self preservation. He thinks that he's indestructible, that he can do anything and that nothing can stop him. That bleeds into narcissism. These are traits of a sociopath. All sadists, rapists, and sociopaths. Okay, check this out. Apparently, he's not a rapist. However, if you are a rapist, then you derive pleasure from the suffering of another individual, and you also are getting pleasure from the control you have over that individual. That then means, if you are a rapist, you are also a sadist, because you are getting pleasure from their pain. But the control factor, in addition to the fact that you are intentionally and knowingly depriving someone of human rights, that puts you in the antisocial personality disorder spectrum, which is classically partially known as a sociopath. This character is a sadist. This character is a sociopath. He has been warped from birth into this mindset. But the author is doing an entire circus act to try and make him seem like he's really evil and bad. That's why they have a whole scene about him throwing two kids off a cliff. The author's trying to add this shock value, like, damn, this guy's fucking cold, right? But then at the same time, the author's trying to make it seem like, oh, he's out to protect the dolphins. He's out to save the little kittens. He cared for Christina when he said, didn't you think about saving her? And he doesn't want to kill cops because they're not that bad. It's not like they're out polluting all over the world. Like politicians, they're able to be saved too. They're not that bad. Killing them's a waste of time. And he's not a rapist. That's so below him. Like that is so vile. Like if you're a rapist, you should be killed. It's a fucking headache, man. Do you want me to like this guy, or do you want me to hate this guy? See, if you had the character saying directly, I am not a sadist, I am not a sociopath, and if you think so, I'm gonna kill you. That would make sense. That would make sense because it's him, the character, in denial. The character thinks that he's normal and that he's good and righteous. Very few villains actually think that they're villains and enjoy the concept. Most villains view themselves as a hero or at least an anti-hero. And so, if you would have had this character declaring that he wasn't a sadist and that he wasn't a sociopath, it would work. But if you, the narrator, are saying it, but then you're showing that he clearly is, it's a contradiction. It's like the narrator saying, he hated the color red. And then in every scene, you show him wearing red. Then you have this little element on page 174. It says, he should have regrouped right there and then, but when the beast took over his mind, it wasn't very controllable and it was extremely unpredictable. What? What fucking element is that in this book? The beast takes over his mind. I thought he was the beast. There's another element of this in the book too. What the fuck is that? That is clearly a different vision for this character, and there's still sprinkles of it
in the book. There, at some point in the manuscript, there must have been a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of situation where this character possibly was good, and then he had like a split personality that would take over, and he would be evil or something. But in the dominant portion of this book, that's not the case. And yet, here we have this little reference that there is something secondary, that there is a beast that can take over his mind. What is that? A really big problem about this book is there is no distinction. The protagonist, the antagonist, and the narrator, all three agree about the world, about nature, and they all have the same exact opinion that humanity is this horrible blight, this horrible cancer on the earth. And this mindset drives the story. These three, the protagonist, the antagonist, and the narrator, whoever that is, could all three sit down at the table, drink some coffee, and they would all be like, yeah, 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 and they would all agree with each other about humanity's place on the earth. Look at page 55, okay? 55, the narrator says the following. Lightning tore through the dark sky, followed immediately by a rumbling thunder. Mother Nature opened the clouds and broadsided the entire region with rain, and she didn't hold back. The rain hit the ground hard, quickly churning the soil into a mud bath with droplets the size of cherries. Not long after, hailstones the size of golf balls began falling as well. The powerful wind sounded like a battle cry, protesting what humans had done to their world for centuries. That is what the narrator is saying, and that is the mindset the narrator is trying to get the reader to accept. If that's the case, how am I then supposed to be against Nero when he says humanity is destroying the earth? We've got to save the earth. Let's get rid of humanity. And then you have a scene in here where the main character and her friend Tammy come across some animals in cages, and they're basically talking about how it's so horrible that the animals are in cages. And they even say, perhaps we should put the people in the cages. And Nero is actually sitting close by, eavesdropping, and he's nodding his head like, I agree with that. So, how are we supposed to pick a side here? You should have had one side. Like if their whole thing that you're trying to highlight in this book is conserving the environment, you should have had one character be for it and the other character be against it. Seems like every character in this book wants to save the earth from humanity and thinks humanity's bad. That's not realistic. Again, this is fantasy. This is someone highlighting the way they think the world should be. Then in chapter 18, which is just this big ass, absolutely pointless scene about a character who doesn't fucking matter going out and engaging in some fucking Easter egg hunt that results in a random ass shootout. Like what the fuck is happening? In this situation, you have this scene on page 202 where the narrator says the following. She had never been a nature freak, but she did love nature over any concrete desert, and that was why she worked in Skull Creek. However,
The devastation to nature from huge bulldozers, semi-trucks, excavators, and dump trucks was just awful. The land was completely ruined, all for a few measly grains of yellow dust. So here we have this other character who is completely useless, and she apparently loves nature more than cities. And then the narrator goes on this whole jag talking about how the excavators and the bulldozers and everything have destroyed nature. So them knocking over trees and digging up the dirt has completely ruined this whole area. It's completely ruined. What about fire? What about burning down the trees? Is that good for the earth, or is that bad? Because see, all the climate change people, they say, the climate's changing, and we're gonna burn down all the trees, and we're all gonna burn and die, and it's so bad, right? Well, this guy who was supposed to be the servant of Mother Earth sets a fucking mountain on fire. On page 300, someone shouted, "Look up there! The mountain is burning!" And so on. Thick, dark smoke intermingled with the first rays of the morning sun as the fire on the distant mountain fought for dominance. Are you fucking shitting me? Nero. Smokey the Bear would whoop your fucking ass for having the audacity to dress up like a bear and set his fucking forest on fire. You know what Captain Planet would do if he saw you setting his fucking trees on fire? He'd turn you into a fucking tree. Steve Irwin's children should feed Nero's ass to the fucking gators for pissing all over his legacy by rendering all those animals homeless by burning down the fucking mountain. If Greta, that little retard from Sweden, saw this, she'd be giving you the death stare. Look at this image. You see this tiny little slither right here? That's carbon dioxide. It makes up only 0.03% of all of our atmosphere. That's that shit that the climate change people like Greta say is the end of the world. Meanwhile, you see this giant portion here? This giant thing called nitrogen that takes up almost all of our atmosphere? Nitrogen is over 300 times more effective at being a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. And do you know what's released when you burn wood? When you set the forest on fire? It's nitrogen. Worst servant of the earth ever. Infant Annihilator is a better servant of the earth. And this brings me to the greatest problem about this book. The narrator. The narrator of this book is very loud, very voicey, always adding in extras, opinions. The question is, whose fucking opinion? What perspective? What point of view? Like, this narrator is all over the fucking place. As you read through this story, the narrator knows everything. The narrator knows what's happening in all places at all times, and knows that this person's feeling this person's thinking that, this person misses this person fears that. This narrator looks into the thoughts of characters word for word, and is telling you word for word what the character is thinking. Christina specifically thought
this. Christina specifically thought that, word for word. However, the narrator looks into the specific word for word thoughts of all characters. The narrator knows the thoughts and the feelings of all these characters, sometimes in the same, not just chapter, but section, just a couple of lines later. So we have the horrible taboo, writing sin of head hopping, but it doesn't stop there. Like I said, the narrator is very voicey. The narration changes in voice. One scene where you've got a more redneck, simple minded character, and it seems like it's coming from their perspective. The narrator is using like redneck slang and doing cursing more, adding in points of view that would probably come from that character. But then when there's a section where the point of view is someone more polite or older, or like the main character who's this kind of like ditzy girl, then the narration becomes much more calm and sympathetic and loving towards dogs and how cute they are, and they're looking at views and like, wow, it's so beautiful, it's the most beautiful thing ever, like in narration, and oh, this is so cute and adorable. So that's going into first person, where in first person there is no word for word thoughts like, I need to go outside, James thought. That's not a thing, because in first person the narration is the thoughts of the main character. So here we have this narrator who is merging with these different characters and their points of view, voicing things with their mindsets. In chapter 16, the infamous chapter, which is the big info dump about the antagonist, there's constant mention of, for instance, on page 177, it says, coughing, cursing, and spitting, the prey started to regain some courage. And then another section right below it, it went on like that for the next, oh, the word "the's" not even there. It went on like that for next 5 minutes, and the more time went by, the more courage the prey got. So here, the narrator is referring to the kidnapped victims of Nero, these two guys who are the kitten killers. The narrator is referring to them as the prey, not as his kidnapped victims or as Nero's prey. It's the prey, as if it is his prey, the narrator's prey. This happens also on page 173. You have this part. Weak-minded characters did that, like so many two-leggeds. That's narration. That's not the character speaking. So the narrator is speaking from the perspective of this character, as if it is first person, calling humans two-leggeds, calling these two victims the prey. But then on page 115, you have this section where this character says in dialogue, I tell you, all those motherfucking foreigners are taking over this fucking place, she muttered, ignoring the facts that her own mother had been born in Germany and she hadn't a speck of Native American blood. So in this section, the narrator is not speaking in this weird first person perspective where they're like in the shoes of the character. Now the narrator is pulling back. The narrator is distancing itself from this character. The narrator is disagreeing with the perspectives of this character. The narrator is arguing that this person isn't an American, or that the Native Americans are somehow more American, and that basically arguing that because her own mother had been born in Germany, I guess that it's hypocritical to be against foreigners. This is not even congruent with other parts of the story. I have no idea what perspective this narrator is. It's like all perspectives. I mean, look at this section. This is on page 81. The narrator says, he decided some fresh air was better than anything here at the station. So it's like the narrator is at the station. The narrator isn't viewing it from like high above saying, you know, there, down there in the station. No, the narrator's in the station saying he decided some fresh air was better than anything here in the station. Same thing happens on page 61. It says in narration, she lived nearby, less than a mile away. Just had to follow this road until he got to a small three-way intersection. This road, like the narrator standing on the road, not floating above saying on that road that he down there is on. I mean, just look at this section here in chapter 4. They have this fight that happens between two characters. And look at this. There's two characters in this conflict. One is a character named Joseph, and the other one, we'll just call him the Giant. On page 56, it says, Joseph, who considered himself unnaturally intelligent, blah, blah, blah. He didn't know if this idiot was one, but he suspected it. Alright, so in that section, it's at least third person, we know that for sure. Possibly third person limited, but we'll see. After a paragraph of description about the giant that he is encountering in this instance, the narrator says he had found the abominable snowman. Sarcastically, the narrator saying that. In the next sentence, the next paragraph, it says in narration, this Yeti reeked of alcohol. Further down, it says Joseph now had absolutely no desire to fight this missing link whatsoever. It then refers to him again in another instance. Suddenly, the Yeti pulled him closer. And again on page 58, with that said, the Yeti, which is now lowercase, so that's inconsistent, spat a stream of black juice in Joseph's face. So the narrator is speaking negatively about this adversary in this conflict, right? So the narrator is not attached to this Yeti, this missing link, this abominable snowman, right? But then magically, just in the next paragraph, this character whose nickname is Little Noise, that's the Yeti, the giant, the point of view completely switches, and now we're just, for some reason, unknowingly, you just figure it out as you go, you're now in their shoes. Noise, the guy, could have slowed down when he saw the
large puddle next to them, but he did not. Instead, he increased his speed and a wave of dirty water splashed the kids, covering them with mud. And then it says, dumbass kids. But that's in narration. So the narrator is calling them dumbass kids. Then over here on page 59, we get word for word thoughts from his mind. Nothing like a mix of fresh coffee and chew, he thought. Then as the scene goes on, because he's now in this conflict with these kids, it says a sports car drove by and a bunch of kids screamed, "Amateur night, you old bastard. Go home and take a shit." And then in narration it says a flood wave of water from another puddle hit Noyes in his face, making it even uglier. He looked after the young assholes as dirty rainwater dribbled down his beard, and decided that whatever he had planned on doing could wait. And then it says, sides. This is narration. It says apostrophe capital S SIDES, sides. It's a improper slang of the word B-sides. So in narration it's saying sides, he'd already forgotten what it was. Like the narrator all of a sudden has this hard country accent. He slammed the door shut, made a 3-point turn, and headed after the kids. An eye for an eye, the little fuckers. That's all in narration. That's not. Then you have this situation on page 60. Again, like, look at this. This is on page 60. You have this line right here, which says, the sparse brain cells in the middle of his huge head made a sudden pause. So now the narrator is speaking outside of the perspective of this character in third person omniscient, saying the character's dumb. That's here. But then right here, this whole section, it says in narration, hell, as long as it weren't that illegal alien sheriff from Mexico, or worse, the new Blackie sheriff, then he might be able to talk him out of this one. Oh wait, the new sheriff hadn't got here yet. Dash, it was still that damn Mexican. Or was it? Question mark. That is a narration. That's not dialogue. So again, the narrator has put on the redneck slang of, instead of saying him, talk to him, it's talk to him, apostrophe I am. And instead of B-sides, it's apostrophe sides. And then there's clearly racist undertones in here. The damn Mexican, the Blackie sheriff. It's a fucking train wreck of perspective and point of view, and I gotta be honest, man. I mean, it says right here in the opening of the book that he's got that he had already published, that this author, Eric Martin Willen, had already published 4 other books before doing this one. And I cannot understand how this shit not only made it in the book, like how the hell did it get past an editor? I mean, because it says that it's part of this open window publishing house, which, by the way, if you turn it sideways, looks like Pac-Man eating a block. But that's off topic. Um, how did it get past the editor, for one? But two, if you are an experienced author who's written 4 books, how the hell did that make it into your manuscript? I understand that the author, this was the first time the author was doing something in this genre, which I don't think he understands what this genre is because of how much comedy is in here. But that does not excuse all of this narration problem. Alright, so overall, man, what's going on in this book? Well, I think this book at one point in time had really good potential to be a really interesting, cool story. And I don't know this for sure, but this is my opinion. This is what I assume. I think this author presented his story about a main character named Nero. And that main character was the villain. He was the protagonist, but he was villainous. And he was going to go on this big killing rampage or whatever. And opposite him was going to be the police department. And there was going to be this cat and mouse back and forth thing throughout the story. And it probably would have been a decent book. But he presented the story probably to these publishers. And they said he's got to add some equal representation. It's not going to be good as it is. Maybe you should redo some stuff, add in a woman or something. And so he went back and did a whole revision and came up with this thing where there's now this character named Christina Dawn, and she's just some dingy ass girl who's just by some unfortunate chance found her way into this story. Because that's what this is. I mean, quite literally. The story is Nero, the Beast, has snuck into this town under an alias of Ted Haglin, and he's been hunting down this character named Carlos. Meanwhile, the main character, Christina, just so happens to move to the town and get kind of caught up in it. In this book, there are 33 chapters, plus a prologue and an epilogue. So you could argue 35 chapters. The inciting incident happens in chapter 29. That's not a joke. The inciting incident is when the Beast finally clashes with the main character, Christina. And it's in that moment that Christina is now faced with a conflict and has to make a choice about what she's going to do. It's at that point she then decides she's going to hunt down this character and stop him. This then leads to the climax only 3 chapters later, in chapter 32, when the big showdown happens and Christina beats the villain. So you have to read 29 chapters before the inciting incident. That is what we would call an epic fail. Everything leading up to that is just random time-killing incidences of the main character getting a new house, which, by the way, has all this security
And I was like, oh, okay, I see where this is going. Big security house. She's gonna be like locked inside it, trying to survive, while the beast is outside trying to get in. Nope, nope, that never happens. There's no reason for all that security bullshit. Not a thing. There's the random shootout with the cop and the people in the truck. Not necessary. The prologue of the body being found, that serves as false action or false hype or whatever you want to call it. It's not even necessary. Um, I mean, what the fuck? If you could just read chapters 29, 30, 31, and 32, and I guess 33, that's the real story. Everything else, it's just not necessary. The conflict with um, Nero and the kid in the car, about shooting him because he fucks up his car. That's not necessary. The big rant where 3B or BBB is ranting in the bar. That's not necessary. Like all of that shit. Like what is the point? You're following this dumbass girl doing bland ass shit, hanging out with dogs. And apparently we look into the minds of the dogs and we know what the dogs are thinking too, word for word. Um, and just all this shit about her house and the dumbass incident where Tammy tells off some woman in a store and calls up. It's like, what is that, man? What is that? And then there's like this whole build up of the main character going shopping and getting clothes for some fucking hoedown party thing at the fair. And then there's like a whole big section of describing the fair. None of it's necessary. I mean, then at the fair, there's this giant riot battle thing that makes absolutely no fucking sense. And it literally seems like some shit that would be in a satirical movie. I mean, just straight up. An explosion goes off, right? And after that explosion, like a fucking riot, like a full on riot starts. And there's like, it's like Battle of the Five Armies from the Hobbit film. You've got bikers, miners, lumberjacks, police, hippies, and I guess like some other, like normal people. Like all these factions apparently are all on this massive us versus them battle for no fucking reason. I mean, if it goes boom, big ass explosion, what do people do? They go, oh shit. Should we go try to help? What? I hear some sirens. I guess the officials are going to take care of it. I hope everybody's okay. Anyway, yeah, I'm going to get that cotton candy. No, not in this book. You hear boom! And then all of a sudden, everybody's just like fucking sharks and the jets fucking fighting each other, man. Like, let's go! And there's fucking stampedes of people running around. The police are beating people's fucking heads in for no reason. And then Nero releases these fucking lions and tigers just to add to the chaos. So now there's animals running around attacking people. And it's like, what the hell is happening? And then, like, the main character who has this whole fucking gang of people. Like, anyone who crosses her path, like, worships the ground she walks on and instantly merges with her entourage. Like, they're all, like just her following. And they all are, like, in this, like, end of the world apocalyptic situation where they're all jumping into her truck. They're like, we gotta get out of here. Go, come on, get in the back. Hurry. And there's like people running and trying to like steal their truck. Like the fucking the world's exploding. It's 2012 apocalypse shit, and there's zombies running, and everyone's frantically just trying to run and survive. And you're like, what is happening? And what do? They just go back to Frank's house and fucking drink coffee. I think that about sums up this fucking book. Bye.